Heavenly Father, source of all truth and wisdom, who knows and loves the whole creation, continue to watch over our community, that truth may prevail over distortion, wisdom triumph over recklessness, and the concerns of every person be heard. Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joe. As always, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items this evening?
Thank you. None this evening.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of Council, if I can have a mover and seconder for the agenda, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Doucette, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? With none, we'll move on to items requiring a separate discussion. Members of Council? With none, if I can have a motion. Oh, I tried. I really did try. Councillor Desmarais.
Item 1, please, Mr. Mayor.
Any further items, members? With none, members of staff, are there any items you require being lifted? Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I have done, I have asked Evan Och, our Economic Development Officer,
Right.
if Council wants to pull the item regarding the red application.
Sure.
If there's any questions, and Mr. Och is here to answer them.
Okay, if I can have a member of council lift that, please. 7. Councillor Danch? Okay, that's great, thank you. Any further items, members of council? With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the remainder of the items, please. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Steele. Was it 9? Okay, that's fine. Thank you. You cut that one too? Okay. The remainder of the items, we haven't moved and seconded. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We do have one delegation this evening, Ms. Patty Moss. Patty, welcome. Patty is going to be talking with us about delaying the rural roadside cutting on municipal roads. Page 7 in your agenda, members of council. Patty, once again, welcome. If you just want to press the gray button there, and you're live.
Hello and good evening. I'd like to start off by giving thanks to Council, the Mayor, of course, and staff for allowing me to have this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Patty Moss. I live on 776 Chippewa Road in Port Colborne. The basic reason why I'm here is to request the delay of roadside cutting from July 1st to October 1st, as well as I'm also suggesting the width of being cut to be reduced as well. I realize this might not be the right timing to be asking for requests, but I came across some outstanding findings regarding our city's roadsides. I feel this information should be taken seriously in consideration before any future roadside maintenance decisions have been made. First of all, I want to make sure everyone understands the main purpose of my talk, so I can go over some basic information. Insects are important species for our ecosystem, especially pollinators. For those that are not aware of what our pollinators include, is bees, butterflies, moths, ants, beetles, and flies. Pollinators are important because of their special interaction with flowers. Carrying pollen from one flower to the next, they unknowingly provide over a third of the fruit and vegetables we eat. It seems quite simple, but it's not. The flowers have evolved and transformed over millions of years to attract the right pollinator to ensure its survival. In turn, the pollinators have depended on these flowers for food for their survival. We are the ones who have benefited from these ongoing codependency interactions between flower and pollinator. But our pollinators are in trouble. We're all aware of what's going on with the bees, as well as the monarchs have been hitting the news in the past few years, up in decline. Scientists believe that the monarch butterfly is the canary in the coal mine, meaning what other wild pollinator insects are disappearing along with the monarch butterfly. Writing down the basic info regarding myself, I'm what you call a citizen scientist. I collect data for researchers and students for various universities. I've been tagging monarchs for the University of Kansas for 5 years. I've been testing for parasites for the University of Georgia for the past 3 years. Also, the University of Minnesota, since finding out what I'm finding along Port Colborne's roadsides, they want my information as well. I attended the North American Conference of Monarch Butterfly in Minnesota in 2012. I've also attended the Monarch Teacher Network workshops, which enabled me a permit through the MNR to collect the monarch species. My story starts with last year. I was needing monarchs for a butterfly festival I was hosting in September, as well as workshops I was doing in classrooms at various schools in Port Colborne. But as you heard the news in last year, I was pretty desperate for monarchs. I didn't find any on my property. I had to wait until late in July. I found a monarch laying eggs along Second Concession, so I collected the eggs. So I then continued to check the roadsides, and I noticed a fair amount of eggs. I actually collected over 100 last year. Luckily, I was successful with my butterfly festival and with the presentations at school. But they got me thinking this year. I was thinking, well, how many, is it a fluke that last year I found so many? So I chose an area from east to west, from 140 to Brookfield Road, from 3rd Concession to the lake. And I went out just before the roadside cuttings were beginning. Well, I missed a few roads because it already started. I was a little behind. But I found an astronomical 254 eggs and caterpillars on these milkweeds. It basically overwhelmed me. I had to collect them all because my kids were with me, and knowing that it would be destroyed, I couldn't bear with that. Running the PowerPoint here. So the monarch's taken over my dining area, my living area, my complete life for the next couple of months. It consumed over 3 hours every 2 days of feeding, changing containers. I made sure I raised them all individual containers to make sure any diseases or parasites wouldn't be transferred. I can't imagine ever having to do this again. Because the main problem I had was I had all these caterpillars like saved from this area of Port Colborne, but I had no milkweed because all of Port Colborne's milkweed was already cut from the roadsides. So it got me thinking for a while, why do we have so many eggs and caterpillars along our roadsides here? And I spoke with others in the monarch world, and they were surprised at how many I was finding this year. So I was thinking, monarchs migrate north in order to find fresh milkweed. So the hardest part of their journey is crossing the Great Lakes. So once they cross the lake and arrive here, they spend a few days feeding and refueling. So it's a perfect opportunity for other monarchs to meet other monarchs and mate. So then you have females that have 300 eggs at least to lay within a week and a half, 2 weeks time span. So she's on a mission. And in Port Colborne, the only dependable and safe supply of milkweed is alongside our roadsides. I'm going to get to the point what I'm here for. What are the benefits of delaying roadside cutting? Well, first of all, monarchs are a species at risk. They are also going to be on the endangered species list. The United States has already put forward a petition to have the monarch on the endangered species list on their country. One thing I'd like to note, in 1983, the World Wildlife Federation declared the monarch butterfly's behavior an endangered phenomenon, meaning the monarch is the only insect in the world that makes this the longest journey migration. As well, it takes 4 generations in order to do the full, complete migration circle route. It's kind of amazing when you think about an insect that weighs less than an ounce to travel over 4,000 kilometers in order to survive. I know by making a simple change to how we manage roadside cuttings, we can see the results immediately. I have the data here. I have a full clipboard of every single monarch egg caterpillar where it was collected from. But who else would benefit from the delay of roadside cutting? Pollinators, of course. And just for interest's sake, this bee here is the rusty-patched bumblebee. When we were all kids, this was the most common bumblebee we would see. Well, nowadays it's gone. The only colony left of it is in the Pinery Provincial Park. So getting back on to pollinators. Pollinators are required for 2/3 of all farm-grown vegetation in Niagara. We are a fruit belt area, we live in it, and with fruit requires pollinators. But our bees are disappearing. I'm not going heavy into that discussion at all. But I want everyone to think about this. Where are the bees going to get their food? Just keep thinking about that sentence, because in the big picture, we as consumers choose not to spend much money on our food. We consume lots, but the amount of money we spend on food versus the other things in our lives is pretty small. Therefore, farmers are then pressured into developed farming practices in order to make a living themselves. What I'm meaning by that is, in the past 7 years, farmers can now choose to have a completely wildflower-free crop. So they can have acres and acres and acres without not one wildflower growing in it. That has never been possible, ever, in the history of farming. So therefore, there's a whole complete biodiversity that has been gone. Well, it's not gone yet. There's still lots of farmers that still have wildflowers growing in there, but it's disappearing fast. And with the pressures upon farmers, that will happen soon. So, back to my question, where do bees go? This is a picture of Carl Road. You're facing south. And looking at this picture, you look at the farmer's fields, either side, it's soybeans. There isn't anything else but soybeans growing inside there. Then you look at the roadside, it's all been cut. So really, where is the bees getting their food? There's a little bit of goldenrod on the side, a little tiny little strip of plants there. Here's Weaver Road, same thing. It's completely cut. And this is Shirk Road. Once again, soybean fields, cannot see a wildflower growing in it, and our roadside's completely cut. I feel by waiting until at least October 1st ensures bees and pollinators food until frost. Wild pollinators and farm bees need a lot of pollen and nectar before winter arrives. Not enough food can weaken colonies. Well, you know the story, weak colonies, they get sick, more chances of death. So, who else benefits from delaying roadside cuttings? Us. And simply, as a community, we are supporting biodiversity, which is needed for every living organism in this planet. So by us supporting this biodiversity, it would help our food supply by increasing yields of produce for farmers and gardeners. Roads would look prettier. There'll be more bees and butterflies to look at. This all sounds great, but also we can save tax money as well at the same time. There's 3 cuttings per year. If you omit the middle one, basically reduce your costs of 1/3. This picture here is of Miller Road. What I noticed when going along these roadsides, Miller Road is one of the examples where there's a 7-foot shoulder on the side, but then we're cutting an extra 10 feet alongside the shoulder. I'm very interested in what the purposes of this is, as well as Kalali Street's another example, and other roads throughout Port Colborne. Why are we cutting 10 feet? Well, now this suggestion is, why don't we have shorten the width length and have a smaller tractor run down these roads and make a simpler, more cost-efficient job to get this done? This is a funny thing. Actually, when I was looking at all the roadsides, there's 9 roads altogether that I really examined for milkweed. And of all of them, at least 50% is already cut by homeowners anyways. So the homeowners that are concerned about the roadsides, they already do the job. So this is a great example. This is Cedar Bay Road, and the whole west side of Cedar Bay Road is cut by homeowners. And then on the east side of the road, over 50% is cut by homeowners. So I can't imagine what deal the contractor's getting, considering, I wonder if he's calculating this in his price of the roads that are being cut by landowners. To sum it all up, there's a proven biodiversity in our public drainage system. I like to use the Welland Canal as an example. Alongside the Welland Canal, there's seaway lands on either side that are left undisturbed, nor are they sprayed with pesticide chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. Well, along these 2 strips along the canal, over 95% of our wild bee colonies in Niagara are located in this condensed strip. Imagine the impact of these pollinator habitats throughout Port Colborne's roadsides. Finally, I like to summarize this all up by the magic that is performed between the flower and the pollinator is rarely appreciated, nor is it noticed. Yet this magic where life regenerates itself over and over again is the key to our existence. So why don't we use rural roadsides as a way to protect species at risk, encourage pollinators, at the same time help gardeners and farmers, and most importantly, provide a healthy environment for future generations to come. This picture was taken last year at one of my workshops at DeWitt Carter, and this butterfly, tag number SGT417, was a male caterpillar that I recovered from concession 2. And just imagine, you can just look at the impact that this one butterfly had on these kids. I'm done.
Great job, Ms. Maas.
Thank you.
Members of council, any questions or comments of the presenter? Councillor Butters and Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Patty first contacted me, I found this to be a really fascinating thing that she's doing. Certainly something I think very worthwhile, considering the statistics that she's given us of 2/3 of Niagara's fruit needs to be pollinated. I mean, just that connection between us and what happens in the world around us really is really brought to the fore by what she's doing. So I personally would, I would kind of like to see if there's a way to work with Patty. I think that there's probably some logistics here that could happen to help her along in her work and to provide some spots. It has to be done safely. I think there has to be like certainly some public education component of this, because not everybody's going to be happy about their roadsides not being cut if that was to occur. But if people realize the very good reason behind it and embrace that reason, I think it could be really beneficial. I'm not suggesting all of it at this time, but certainly we could make some baby steps in this regard, and even as a trial basis or a pilot project, shall we say. So that's personally what I would like to see happen is our staff to work with Patty and see if we can't make this Port Colborne. It sounds like it's already a mecca for monarchs. Like so many that end up here, so many more could survive. So that's how I feel about it.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Patty, for your for your presentation. I think we share a common interest in the, especially the monarch and the bees. I guess are, you know, we all have heard about their troubles, but I guess I'll just give you a little history. The monarchs a number of years ago chose our yard to gather in, well, the ones at least, but there was literally hundreds, if not thousands, that gathered there for about 2 days, and I would assume it was about this time of year, so probably before they were heading. But the trees were literally covered in them, and when they would pulse, it would change the color of the tree. It was absolutely fabulous. And we just noticed them there again in the past number of days, not in the great quantity that we had before, but they are amazing. And since then, my family started researching, like you said, about the terrific journey they take. We watched the documentary on it. Anyways, it's a big deal, and they are in serious trouble. But I think Councillor Butters may have hit on something too, the education factor. When I seen this coming up on Council's agenda, I met with about a dozen farmers on Saturday morning to kind of run it by them. These are the cash crop farmers in Ward 4. Not all, but they have a lot of acreage. They are extremely concerned when they hear about cutting the weeds on the side of the roads, or not cutting them, or delay cutting, because I know we're obligated under, and maybe our acting CAO can enlighten us, but the Ontario Weed Act, we're obligated, I believe, to cut noxious weeds, and not all weeds are noxious. There's a list, and which we're really fortunate milkweed has been taken off that list. It was on there, now it's off, so that's not a concern. But the farmers certainly have a huge concern. They'd actually like to see us do just what you said. The region cuts right back to their crop line, basically on the other side of the ditch when they do the regional roads. We tend just to do up to the ditch. They'd like us to go further and cut more weeds, because they feel that when the weeds go to seed, it ends up in their fields. They have to spend more money on, for lack of a better Roundup, but to control the weeds in their fields. And there is a new weed that's showing up called fleaban, or mare's tail in the U.S., that is resistant to the weed killer. There's farmers that have huge acreage out there that are actually pulling those weeds by hand to try to keep them under control in their fields. It is a major concern for them because they can't get rid of it in an actual easy manner. So this may be part of the education. Would delaying that cause those weeds to go to seed and get in the farmers' fields? I know, I'm sure Councillor Butters has had the complaint that we don't cut enough, because, you know, from a number of the farmers. So, but I would really like to see us try to highlight this in Port Colborne. What if we became the butterfly friendly city, right? I mean, we could do this. We have property. We could plant, butterfly friendly gardens. I mean, it wouldn't be the extent of roadside, but you know what, we could start someplace. But I think before we do a knee-jerk reaction and think it's going to be easy to just not cut those weeds, we need to have a discussion with a number of people. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but it is, you know, if the word gets out there, we're just not going to cut them. We're going to have a whole bunch of seats filled up by the cash croppers, and they're going to be in here, you know, with a big concern. But anyways, maybe our acting CAO can enlighten us on what we need to do with the Ontario Weed Act. And, I'd like to see us continue this farther than just your presentation tonight. I think it actually has some merit, and, maybe we can do something about this.
Thank you.
I would hope councillors would stand up and volunteer for a committee to look at it.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Bodner. The Weed Control Act actually lists all the noxious weeds. What we do each calendar year, we put a notice to all the residents of Port Colborne, industries, businesses, whoever is a property owner, advising of those noxious weeds. They should be destroyed. We only act on complaint basis. If we get a complaint that one of the weeds, poison ivy for example, which we deal with a lot in the urban area, we have to then inform the property owner that that weed is a noxious weed and you are required to cut it. We only act on complaint basis on our property. So if a farmer had a complaint, and if upon inspection we found that there is a noxious weed along the roadside, then we would be obligated to cut it under the Weed Control Act.
Thank you. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Your Worship. Good points by both Ward 4 councillors. I don't think we have to create a new committee. We do have our environmental committee. With that committee, working with staff, I think, and obviously Patty, she's brought this forward. I think her knowledge in this is very good. But you can go further. You have to organize the farmers. Greenhouse operators are another source. Homeowners, especially in the Ward 4 country areas, whether it's Ward 4, even some on this side of the canal, the region itself, the region of Niagara. And I think the important thing here is and Ron brings up a number of good points about what are good weeds, what are bad weeds. And I think what you got to do is look at the plantings and how can we educate our farmers on starting planting strips, whether it's on their side of the ditch of the road. How do you knock out the weeds that are harmful to the crops? How do you get rid of those? How do you plant other types of plants that'll come in and help eradicate those plants, but they're helpful to this cause? So I think there's all kinds of things that are being done here. But I think if we forward this to our environmental committee, that they can work and put an actual good plan together. But I think the important thing, and I think Ronnie, great idea, talking to the farmers, is getting all these people together and he just says education, but coming in with one tool, one plan of action that you can spread across the city that's going to work for this. But and I agree, Ron. When I was a kid at our farm in Wainfleet, there were summers where thousands and thousands, we just couldn't believe the butterflies. And then in the early fall, you'd see them coming back as they're heading back to Mexico. So, yeah. But I think if we can forward this to that committee, I think it's a good start.
Thank you. I will take that as a recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Butters. Any further questions or comments to the presenter? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. Patty, just thanks for the education. Great presentation. I'm kind of sitting going, wow, who knew? Is there anywhere, to your knowledge, any city that promotes this? They let the milkweeds grow or the weeds grow to attract the monarchs? Or would this be something unique to Port Colborne, where if we could move forward with something that would be proactive in attracting them here and allowing them a place to land on their migration, would be the first, or is there anywhere else that has something in place right now?
Ms. Moss.
Mostly communities promote it within residential yards and homes and stuff like that. I have not heard of an instance where promoting it through our roadsides. One thing that's make its roadsides so special for monarchs is because I have milkweed in my yard, especially this year and last year, but I didn't have as many eggs or caterpillars as like our roadsides. It's because monarchs follow linear lines. They follow railroad tracks, riverbeds, along the shore, forests, rows, and roadsides. So that's why the roadsides are so important for monarchs, because she has such a short time frame to lay all these eggs, and it's an easy route for them to follow, and that's why the high concentration of eggs along the roadsides. So no, I've looked and looked and looked, and I haven't found a city yet in Ontario that promotes the growing of wildflowers and roadsides.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments of the presenter? With none, Ms. Moss, well done. Great job. Members of Council, we do have a recommendation on the floor. Any questions or comments further to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Patty, before you leave, have we extended an actual invitation to join that committee for discussions?
That was part of the recommendation.
Was part of it? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
She's already been at our committee once.
Okay, perfect.
I
just wanted to make sure.
think Councillor Elliott just volunteered too.
Who knew? I had no idea.
We're going to move on to my report, members. Just a couple updates with respect to some projects that we're working on here locally. in particular to infrastructure. I'm sure Mr. Hanson and his department is aware of the CSO program that the region is embarking on within the next couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, tomorrow at Public Works, to update the current combined sewer overflow control policy, we're going to be discussing that. Mr. Hanson, I'm sure, has all his applications ready for the region to apply for, like we have in the past, to get some of those CSO programs underway. This, members of council, as you know, and we've been involved in this for quite some time, but again, it's going to be reestablished for 2015 to better incorporate both the local area as well as the region's priorities to timely eliminate, reduce, and report on the CSOs, the combined sewer overflows, and with wet weather flows as they negatively impact on the health, safety, environment, and the economy of Niagara. This will in fact align with, of course, what we're doing here with our asset management plan, but also, obviously, will also align with the financial strategy, the affordability strategy that we're putting in place to, again, work in tandem with the asset management plan. The recommendation going to be put forward tomorrow is that staff be directed to include the annual CSO program in the operating budget so that it is an annual part of the region's budget, so that year after year we can look at tapping into some of those funds here in Port Colborne to ensure some of the projects that we're going to be working on here locally can have regional contributions. So I wanted to update you on that, as well as intermunicipal transit, and this goes to Peter. For the most part, again, tomorrow at Public Works, committee will be entertaining a follow-through, and of course with that a recommendation ultimately to Regional Council to give direction related to the intermunicipal transit system, recommending of course short-term improvements to the intermunicipal transit system that support current and future GO transit connections, which I'll touch on in a second with respect to how to connect GO here to the south, and as well identify potential connections that would form the basis for basic intermunicipal transit service across the region and would evolve over time, of course, to be a full-blown regional transit system, which I'm sure we all support as we have in the past. As well, this is probably the most important part, is that it's an outline of process to clarify roles and responsibilities and ensure that intermunicipal transit connections evolve in a manner that is coordinated and implemented from the perspective of the user. Not only the user with respect to the customers, the transit riders, but also the users with respect to the municipalities that will be partnering within this system. I think Peter, yourself, or a member of staff have already been involved with establishing the guiding principles, as well as the connections to the GO transit system as it comes into the Niagara region. And finally, again, an engagement with the local municipalities to ensure that the formalized structure is facilitated, including the local level as well as the regional level, not just be not a process that we're just told how it's going to be done, but that we're actually going to be the architects of that system. So just a heads up on that. And lastly, the connection, as Council may remember, back on July 28th, I spoke to you about conversations that Ms. Karen Ettinger of Trillium and myself have been having with respect to and Ron, we talked about this, and we had a presentation at Transportation at the region just last week, how Karen and Trillium are recommending a Niagara Rail Transit Spine. That's what we're calling it. That will connect GO as well as intermunicipal transit from the north to the south, utilizing our short line railway that we own and Trillium operates. Karen was last week was at the Transportation Strategy Steering Committee. Did a great job. Did a great job in her presentation and introduced her concept to the committee. In short, it was recommended that by the committee that it be moved to staff to recommend next steps. Very well received, Ron. I think it was very well received by committee, and for the most part, I have to give Karen a lot of credit for taking on this initiative, because quite frankly, it takes advantage of existing infrastructure that we already have in place to do two things. One is to create another, I guess, mechanism, for the lack of a better word, for those methods of getting around the region, not only by road but also by rail. So I think we have that opportunity with the short lines that do exist here in the region, not only north-south but also the spines that go throughout the region. And lastly, it really brings the GO transit possibilities not only through the corridor east to west from Toronto into the Grimsby, St. Catharines, Niagara Falls areas, but with this being introduced, it also brings GO into the mid to southern regional areas as well. So we're working on that as well. Just a matter of now getting the blueprint completed, brought to council, regional council, and of course given the green light. Of course, part of that is the budgeting, and not only budgeting for operations, but also the budgeting for capital, for equipment, to make it happen. So just a few updates. Any questions? Councillor Bonner?
Mr. Mayor, maybe just a comment. I know you chaired that Transportation Strategy Steering Committee, and you know, we've talked about transit for a long time. So while that in itself is exciting because it's evolving, when it goes on for so long, it becomes just something you do. But when Karen presented the opportunity for Trillium Railroad to be part of the GO system, basically, that was one of the most exciting things we heard in a long time. And it really, you can see the reality of it. You don't have to build the tracks are there. There needs some upgrade, absolutely, and there's some dollars involved, but this is just such a natural fit. And don't think of Trillium's locomotives necessarily going down there. They have cars right now that it's a passenger car with kind of an engine on it. So one of those cars can actually come down the line. It doesn't have to necessarily be pulled by a locomotive. So there's all kinds of exciting opportunities there. And she did a very good job on laying it out with cost and opportunity. And it just, you know, you just want to grab it and implement it right away. But there's that process that'll take some time. So hopefully Regional Council will look at the merits of this and as they go through their budget, you know, give serious consideration to what might need to be put in it financially. So thank you for sharing that and championing that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks.
Further questions or comments? Just one more comment I wanted to make, and Councillor Bodden is correct. The one comment that was made during that meeting, and we've met with GO, Karen's met with GO, is that at the end of the day, the reality is, and I know a lot of people may not like to hear this, but the reality is, until Niagara gets a formalized integrated transit system here in the region, including some anomalies in comparison to other jurisdictions, and a positive anomaly might be having that spine created down the middle of the region utilizing rail, not just rail from GO, but also rail from our own intermunicipal transit system, again aligning and working in tandem with our own buses on the road. But until we actually get something that's formalized and integrated here in the region, GO isn't going to come here. Because they're not going to bring their trains into a region, drop a whole pile of people off that have no way to get anywhere else within that region. So it's incumbent upon us, not only at the regional level, but also working with the local level municipalities, hence the reason why we're working together on this, to get this thing done, and to get it formalized and get it done so that way we can have GO here all year round, as well as the spine that we're proposing from north to south, which will bring, quite frankly, bring GO right into Port Colborne. So very important, and thanks, Ron, for also being in attendance at that meeting. Two other things I wanted to bring up that I almost forgot about. One was I attended a grand, I guess a celebration, a 30-year celebration on Friday over at Airbus Helicopters in Fort Erie. A lot of the MPs, MPP Gates was there, as well as a lot of ministers and others. And I have to say I was very impressed with a company that started off with over 40 individuals 30 years ago that now is over 240 employees. Very impressive. Took a tour of the plant. I had the opportunity to tour the plant with Minister Bradley, as well as others, the president of the company, and just, you wouldn't believe how many people from Port Colborne worked there. I was bumping into people from Port Colborne left, right, and center that work at the plant. But clean plant, very successful plant, and of course a manufacturing plant that we can be quite proud of here in Niagara. And quite frankly, congratulations has to go to those 240 team members that really make that place click, because they're very proud of what they do, and I have to give them a lot of credit for that. The second thing is I did have an opportunity to speak with the Honorable Ed Fast, the Federal Minister of International Trade. And I said to Nancy today, it's kind of comical because, and Ron, you can relate to this, you try to set up a meeting with a minister, you know, it takes you months, and you might get a half an hour with them, and you got to fly to Ottawa. It's a 2-day trip. I had to give Minister Fast a lot of credit. He actually took the time to give me time to speak to him about what I would otherwise would have had to fly to Ottawa to speak to him for, and for the same amount, actually I think he gave me more time than what I would have got with him in the first place if I went down to Ottawa. very kind of him, and spoke to him about some of the alignment of the foreign trade zone policies with the economic gateway strategy. And very receptive to speaking in the future about trying to add further incentives to the foreign trade zone policies with our economic strategy here in Port Colborne and the Niagara region. So very exciting, great guy, very down to earth, and really had an open ear to some of the things that we were discussing, especially with respect to stacking those incentives. We have the CIPs, we have the gateway incentives, now stacking possibly a foreign trade zone designation to Port Colborne and the Niagara region and throughout the region. Something to talk about. So we had a good discussion about it. But again, I have to thank Airbus for giving us that opportunity, quite frankly. So, but again, congratulations to Airbus, and hopefully many, many more years, and hopefully some growth down there in the town of Fort Erie. So great, good on them. So with that, no further questions. Move on to the Regional Councilor's report. Councillor Barrick.
Good evening, folks. I wanted to bring this council up to speed on a couple of items. One of them is looking forward at the 2015 budget. The region has looked at hearing from residents, not only this year, but in previous years. Done several studies and engagement sessions, including the intermunicipal transit study, Imagine Niagara, pre-budget engagement, and phone survey of residents. The list of what we heard back won't be surprising to anybody around this table, but I would like to share the feedback regardless. And some of those items are creating jobs and economic development. There's a strong interest from residents in creating and supporting policies and innovation that enables and supports business development opportunities. We know that. And growing the economy is closely connected to employment and youth retention in the region. Caring for vulnerable residents. There's a strong support for maintaining and expanding initiatives to promote public health and supporting our senior services, children's service programs to reduce poverty and homelessness. Connecting our communities, intermunicipal transit is viewed as important for the future of Niagara. Protecting our environment, residents place high value on waste management, water, wastewater services, and infrastructure, strong support for maintenance of regional roads. And residents view improvements and expansion of public infrastructure as an opportunity to attract businesses to the area. So we've heard as a region loud and clear on these themes. We have begun our 2015 budget process. However, it'll be finalized by the next term of council. So this information in terms of next steps will be passed on to that council once elected as well. And ideally will be put to good use. The other piece that will be coming up very shortly, and I brought it here before, is hard and fast changes to our purchasing bylaw. We've got that coming up. It's important. The region has a lot of public money, and how they spend it is important. And some of the specific undertakings in the changes include a fairness advisor, as well as specific dispute resolution mechanisms. So you may see that forthcoming in the next few weeks, and something in the media possibly. And those changes will be passed on to local municipalities as well as our community partners and vendors and stakeholders. So two of the items I want to bring up tonight, Mr. Mayor. I'll happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Members of Council, any questions of the Regional Councillor? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Dave, for your report. And just one quick question, and can go to either you or to the Mayor. We're passing in our package tonight support for declaring October 20th to the 26th as Waste Reduction Week. And I was just on the region website and just looking at comparing taxes and whatnot across the region. And Port Colborne's charge from the region for waste management is $101 per $100,000 worth of assessment. The lowest charge for that is Grimsby, which is $52 per $100,000 in assessment, which is about half the cost. I was just wondering why we rank the highest in all of Niagara in a cost per $100,000 for waste management.
Councillor Barrick.
Actually, I'll allow the mayor to take first kick at that can as he sits on the Public Works Committee.
The charges that we're seeing right now for all the municipalities are basically, between assessment and what we're assessed for, in the assessment of the homes in Port Colborne. But ultimately, I'm not sure if we're the highest. Are we actually the highest? We're actually the highest?
The highest.
And what's the mid-range?
70s, 70
Yeah.
to 75.
It's a lot of it's based on assessment, but I'll double check that and get back to you.
Okay, and it wasn't, I didn't need an answer tonight, I was just
Yeah.
wondering, because it's Waste Reduction Week, and I just wondered, we're not, adopt that, I just wondered if it was something we could work on in Waste Reduction.
And I think that does fluctuate year after year, again, based on assessment. So I'll double check on where we were last year, because I don't recall that we were highest last year. I think we were about mid-range last year. But again, I'll double check that and get back to you on the reason why, because I'm sure you want to know why.
Yeah.
What the reason is. Yeah, I can get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Councillor Barrick?
Yeah, just say, I don't think it's specifically that Port Colborne is being targeted, and I do believe it fluctuates as well. But we can certainly find out what the historical data is.
Councillor Bodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that, and you can tell me whether it's changed, but I know when I sat in that seat and was on Public Works, I was astonished to find out that Port Colborne had the worst recycling record of any municipality in the region. And I brought that up in the headlines in the paper where I chastised the residents, but I was really astounded that we weren't doing our job. That was a while ago. I'd be interested to know how we're making out now, because at that time, you were charged for waste by the tonnage and you got credit for the amount you recycled. So if you did better in recycling, obviously you didn't throw as much in the garbage, you didn't get charged as much. So yeah, I would just wonder whether that's still the pattern of how they find out how we're, what we're charged for. And I'd like to know where we're at as a municipality on the recycling part.
And I'll take it a step further. There's no question, as I said earlier, your level of assessment makes a difference in terms of what you're being ultimately levied for at either level, whether it be the municipal or the regional level. But also you have to take into consideration the level of service. In the city of Port Colborne, for example, the level of service in comparison to other municipalities in some areas are a lot more. When you look at our downtown BIA areas, for example, as you should know, there's a level of service that they've asked for, and of course, most municipalities, if not all municipalities, are assessed at a base level of service. After that, if there's extra services that, whether it's a business area or whether it's a multi-res customer or whether it's a business individually, those are then charged to the municipality, and then the municipality can do one of two things. They can take it through the levy at that charge, or in fact they can actually have a subcharge to the customer. I'm going to go to Ron in a second because, Ron, if you want to get your thoughts together, I'm going to go to you in a second and ask you to comment on this as well. But at the end of the day, it's all on a level of service that the customer is willing to pay. I've had calls from the BIAs on both ends, Main Street and West Street, Clarence Street, asking for certain day pickups, more pickups during the week versus the one-day pickup, to have more allowed to be picked up. Our events are other factors. Our parks are other factors. The recyclables that we pass on to the region are other factors. And I'm not sure, but I'm sure Councillor Berg's also aware of this. If not, he should be, with respect to those levels of service. And of course, with that, how then we pass it on. Now, there's no question that as a council, you can pass that on as individual user fee charges. But this council's opted not to, and therefore we take it into our overall charge, which then drives that number up. But again, I want to be very clear. That fluctuates based on the level of service that we pass as a council in any given year, working with the BIAs, one of them of which you belong to. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your comments are very, very, very much correct in terms of level of service. All the municipalities have a base level of service that's provided by the regional contract. In addition to that, municipalities can request additional services such as compost bins for restaurants, wheeled carts, and so on. Each one of those additional services are approved by the city and added on to the charges that the region assesses through their various contractors. So when a restaurant comes in and says that they want a couple additional bins for compost materials, we approve that, in almost every case, and then that's added on to our bill. So that's an additional level of service. Each municipality historically treats their waste collection in different ways. Many of the municipalities, of course, before the regionalization of waste management, had their own services. So it was all over the place in terms of levels that were there. So we have this discussion on an annual basis with the region on what charges are, and I know we had a discussion last year with the region about what seemed to be inflated costs for Port Colborne. I think one suggestion I could make, and I'm sure the Commissioner of Waste Management Service at the region would be amenable to this, to ask Ms. Habermel to come down and make a presentation to council and just outline what those services are, just update council on where we are with waste collection, and perhaps answer some of the questions in terms of recycling levels and so on for Port Colborne. And I'm sure they'd be happy to do that.
And just if I may add, Councillor Bonner, going to your comments, it's a valid point. Actually, at one time back when I got on council back in '94, when we were just transitioning from a municipal to a regional landfill site, we had the best recycling in Niagara. And I'm not sure where it is now. I have to double check, so I won't give comment on where we're at right now. But I think going to Mr. Hansen's comments is, with respect to recycling, is the region is in the business to recycle. And our operating budget, our waste management operating budget, is mitigated by how much we recycle. Because, of course, we get paid for the recyclables that we actually put through the system. The more we recycle, the more we get paid, the less the levy is for waste management. One of the things that I'd like to do as well is to make that per municipality. So that way the challenge is on with respect to mitigating our portion of costs to the region based on the recyclables that will come out of our jurisdiction. So those are some of the things to think about, in my experience, are very doable, and then of course it would mitigate that overall charge. Councillor Barrick, anything you wanted to add? You're good? Okay, Councillor Bonner.
Just while we're on this, and I know budget is coming up, can we get a look at our, what we're paying on, for garbage and, the recycling, what services we're offering? It might be a good refresher for council to really take a look at that and either verify again that we want to do everything we're doing, or take a look at how we're doing it. So can we have that? It's probably there, but we never seem to talk about it. It's just part of the budget. Mm-hmm. Can we highlight that as maybe just a little one-pager at budget time?
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. What I would suggest, guys, is for the next council, and I would actually strongly suggest this for the next council, is to, within the audit process that we've been doing with the services audit, but more importantly is the asset management plan that we're putting together, and attached to that the affordability strategy that we're putting together. If you can add that to that, so that way the new council can actually have a good understanding of the levels of service that we're providing, and of course the assets that are attached to that, and the affordability strategy that pays for it. So I think that's what Ron's looking for, and ultimately will give council a good handle on the service and the cost of that service, and who knows, they can maybe possibly relook at that, or charge it out in a different way. Peter?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say that we can provide that information. We have to get that information. The region provides most of that information as to the breakdown of the costs that are associated with what's levied to Port Colborne. Councillor Bodner had mentioned about our budget, and so it never has been part of our budget because it's not our budget. It's the region's budget. So the region just gives us a number when they pass their budget and say, this is the cost, this is your assessment, this is your tax rates that we're going to that you're going to levy on behalf of the region, and we collect it on behalf of the region. But we're able to provide the levels of service that we are getting, and show council, exactly what the region's charging us and for what reasons.
Thank you, Peter. And I think that's what the council is looking for, is the breakdown. Yeah. So that way you can see exactly what the differences are, because just going to Councillor Elliott's comments, there are differences in the region. Some municipalities have a different level of service than others. And I'm going to double check, but I'm assuming that's why the charge is at that rate, is because our level of service is more than, he used Grimsby as an example, than Grimsby.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, and And the big part about it is the assessment, because it is based on assessment, residential, commercial, industrial assessment, and that's, the ratios of that is different in every municipality. So sometimes you'll see, if you have a higher residential base, then it may be higher cost. If you have a lot of industrial and commercial, that may absorb some of it away. So it all depends on that mix.
Right. Good, and I'll take it one step further. Tomorrow at Public Works, I'll actually bring this forward and ask Catherine and Mr. Habermill to actually bring a lot of this information and start the ball rolling, start the process rolling, so a lot of the information, Ron, can come down to you right off the bat. Okay? And I think I'll also give somebody else a lesson in some of these services as well. Members of council, any further questions or comments to the regional councillor who has left? With none? Okay, we'll move on to councillors' items of new business. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson, I don't know what the process is for this, and maybe we can just do it this evening. In going and being in the Chippewa Road area, the southern part of that area, there seems to be a lot of little ones, and a couple of the parents have requested that we put up signs that indicate caution, kids at play, type of thing. And I know we've done that before in other areas. And I was just wondering if we can just give them direction to do that, or do we need a motion on the floor to do it? And
so just, if you're specific, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for two signs, one at the southern part of where a lot of the houses are, I'd say, about 100 yards away from Main Street, to on the other side of the stop sign. There seems to be a lot of children, and the parents in that area are requesting a sign at one end and a sign at the other end, simply saying caution, children at play.
Okay, Mr. Hanson, the process for that, or the protocol that we have on policy?
Mr. Mayor, it's strictly at the pleasure of council. There is a typical sign. It's usually used for playground entrances, this sort of thing, but it's a type of sign that Councillor Doucette's looking for. They can just be added at the pleasure of council. There's no mandatory legislative requirement in terms of these signs. They're just a warning sign.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. So if I can have leave of council to introduce, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Doucette, your motion.
The motion itself is simply that we put a sign about 100 yards away from Main Street to 100 yards past the stop sign, where both signs would simply indicate caution, children at play.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Councillor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
You only allow one a night, by the way.
What was that?
You only allow one a night.
No, not tonight. Usually I do, but not tonight. The other issue is that I believe in August, I think it's in August, or I believe the 28th of August or earlier, there was a request made to study the stop sign that is on Chippewa Road. There are a lot in that community that are really upset at that. I remember being on council when they came here and they asked us to put them up. What I'm hearing today is they're willing to go back and have another petition to tell us to take them out because they're not working. And really, the concern they have is that it creates even more danger. Now, I remember clearly Mr. Hanson telling us that's probably what was going to happen, and it is happening. And that community is saying, yes, he was right, and they want that stop sign pulled out. But I was told that they were studying this at the time in August. So all I want is an update.
Thank you.
If that's
Mr. Hanson?
possible.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware that we were doing another study on that. I remember that some discussion earlier this year saying that we should take a look at it, but then we had a discussion at that time about the previous study that was done, a detailed study, and the residents coming out, and we actually had a public meeting back here on it, and we recommended against it, and we went ahead and put the stop sign up. I don't remember a discussion, and I could be wrong on this, that we were going to study it again. So the stop sign absolutely is not warranted. It never has been. Again, it's at council's pleasure. We can bring another report forward saying that the sign is not warranted and it could be removed, or council could direct that it be removed. It's a bylaw change. It's a change to the bylaw for stop signs within the traffic and parking bylaw.
Councilor,
It's at the pleasure of council.
thank you, Commissioner Hanson. May I suggest, before we get into a game of putting them in, taking them out, putting them in, taking them out, what I would suggest we do is if this council or the future council has any appetite to look at removing those signs, is to simply have a public meeting, like, as we did in the first place, to put the signs in. So that way everyone's involved, everyone has an opportunity to voice their thoughts, and then a recommendation by the council can then be made appropriately by one of the ward councillors. But I would suggest having an open public meeting on it, so that therefore people can voice their concerns or their thoughts.
That's an excellent suggestion, and I think it should happen. One of the suggestions I had to the citizens in that area on Saturday was that it would probably be next council that would take it over, and that they should be prepared to come to a meeting where we are going to be discussing, or whoever's here is going to be discussing that.
Great.
So they're prepared for that, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that that's coming.
Great. Well, we have 3 candidates for Ward 2 here this evening, so I'm sure one of you are going to come back and you can bring it forward to the next council. Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Members of council, any further new business updates? I have Steele, Desmarais, McKinney, Tanch. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, we have 2 young gentlemen in the crowd, Ivan Elmasi and Mitchell Steele. They are in the municipal politics course at Brock University, so they're here looking at what a municipality does during council and committee. So my son asked me when to come out, and I didn't really pick tonight because I knew it would be kind of a slow night, yet we are talking about some great stuff.
He's quitting for a reason,
Yeah.
So what are you thinking?
Yeah. So, and I know, and Mitchell is my son, he's my oldest. I'll get to that in a second because I've got something here on my desk, but Mitchell had Evan as a teacher at Brock last term. And he passed his course, so Evan obviously knows how to teach. So I know my kid's smart, but if a teacher can't teach, who knows what can happen, right? But it's things do come full circle, as we all know. Things do come full circle. When I first got elected, Mitchell was here with Vance, with his class, and he wrote me a note. I won't read it, but it's been in my desk since this has been in my desk late 90s, early 2000s, when he was around 10 or so. So it could have been the late 90s, but yeah, it's pretty neat. So I was actually, no, I won't read it. Well, I'll read it. But I was cleaning out my desk the other day here because I had so much stuff in it that to dispose of, since I got to vacate in, I don't know, November or some whatever date you guys kicked me out of here. But it just says, "Hi, Daddy. You are the best dad. Love, Mitchell. I tried to organize your desk." Obviously, it wasn't successful. But it's funny that that's been here for I've been here for 17 years, so better part of 17 years. So I think it's kind of cool. But I think what's more important is that we're engaging our young people today, and that this isn't the first time Brock has sent their students out to us. And I'm glad these 2 guys are here. Nobody get out of hand. Okay. Nobody. So,
that's great. Thank you, Councillor Steele.
So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, and welcome, guys. As a matter of fact, you want to take over right now? Come on.
We actually might have a couple of questions later for you.
Oh yeah? No problem. We'll stick around. That's great. Thank you. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have actually three items tonight. The first one is the good news story. And I apologize if this is already being done, but I just wanted to make sure that I did speak to it and made mention of it. But I'd like to see us put out some form of acknowledgement, whether it be a letter or something else, to the organizers of Cruise Night, because they have taken Port Colborne to a whole nother level. That was an amazing job, a great summer. Brought attention to the city like we haven't seen in a long time. Other than Canal Days always does it, but this was maybe not equal to, but it was a good runner-up. So great opportunity for everybody to get around and see all of Port Colborne had to offer. So if we could acknowledge that in some way, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's one. 2, this would go, I guess, would be to Ron. We've had a few discussions already today, but here's another one.
I've been watching your emails go back for the past 2 weeks. You and Doucette, I tell you, you're running these guys ragged.
I was complaining because I can't get past, it takes me 2 hours to get down one block. And don't say I talk too much. It has to do with people needing things. But anyway, East Village Park. We've had a lot of discussion about that, and I've met, Councillor Doucette and I have met with Chris Lee, and at the park, we've had a lot of discussion there as well. We were promised that the one pathway would be done, and the basketball court would be seen to, and some trees were to be planted. Well, trees got planted. We asked for no evergreens. We have 3 evergreens, and there was one deciduous tree planted, but it has since died. So that's what we're at. None of the work in the park has been done. The community is really very upset. I mean, they worked very hard to get the $8,000 that they've supplied so far and give it to the city to help along with this. The sunshade hasn't been dealt with at all. We will be going to regional council next week to pick up another check, which was to be given over to the city. And you can only understand, have some understanding of how upset the community are. They've been waiting for a long time, and nothing has happened. And I just would like to know, when can they expect this to be done, so I can take this back to them and I tell them, watch COGECO, you'll hear it right from Ron.
Mr. Hanson?
But I think the problem at the start here was that we didn't have an overall plan of what was required for the park. And that was one of the problems. We were doing bits and pieces. The sunshade wasn't an item that was on the budget for this year. It wasn't budgeted for. But let me get back to staff tomorrow and get a reply back to you immediately on the status of the items that were budgeted for this year and make sure those get done. I know they were getting prices for the asphalt area that was to be redone and reduced. There's a price from our asphalt patching contractor to get that done this year. I know that's on the agenda. The trees and that, I'll have to get back to you with an update and just see the status of them, because I think some of them are being done in-house by our parks people as well. So I'll give you an update, a full update tomorrow after talking to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor?
Thank you, Ron. Mike did put the trees in, so they did come out of parks. And just maybe for a little background information that might be helpful, 3 years ago we didn't have a plan, but this year we did have a plan, and discussed it at great length with Chris Lee. We walked through it all, and we were told that this would be done. And actually we were trying to schedule it around some of the activities that were happening in the park. And I had asked that we not put that on hold to make way for other activities. So just so that's there for background. So, but I would be really appreciate having something come back to me about what's going to happen there.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, my last item.
One more.
I would think this would go to either Ron or Harry. I'm not sure which. This has to do with Lockgate Park and the skate park. People are using the skate park. I had a call from a young mother who was very upset to see little boys, one including her own, having to run across the road and go behind some bushes to urinate. And she felt that was very upsetting that we would have a skate park and promote it for use on the weekends and not have a bathroom open. The washrooms were locked. Daytime on a Saturday, that shouldn't be happening. So if we could just see to making sure that that's taken care of. I mean, that skate park's likely to be used right up till frost and then probably afterwards, but it's reasonable to think that we should have the washrooms open on weekends up till frost at least.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, we'll bring that item forward at budget time for additional cost in terms of keeping the washrooms open at times when the parks aren't being used in the colder months and before the May 2-4 weekend. If we need to keep those open, we'll have to give council a price to consider that.
Okay, thank you. As well, and just to extend from that, I think we've heard a lot about the marina as well, the ramp, and the operation at the marina going past Labor Day. So we'll discuss that as well, but I think those things do have to be included in the 15 budget because there is a reality with weather today with respect to the way it used to be compared to the way it is. And I agree, if we're going to have a skateboard park or any city facility that's operating, there should be all the amenities attached to it that are also operating. So, okay, great, thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is really for a message really for the residents. All of councillors received from Darlene Suttard our environmental compliance supervisor, in regards to salespeople going around the city of Port Colborne, knocking on doors and asking to see people's water meters and then trying to sell them a home filtration system. And she goes, part of the sales pitch was that a filtration system is going to be mandated by the government. She's saying that is not true, that is actually false. And actually, one of our employees was told that the person said that they were working on behalf of the government, and that their system had to be had to be in, that everybody was going to be mandated by in 6 months, so by the end of 2015. She just wanted everyone to know. She got Jamie, our IT guy, to put it on the website, but just for individuals who do not have the opportunity to get on our website, just for homeowners in general. If they're coming knocking on your door and they're asking you to put in a home filtration, it is not going to be mandated. And she says they're not cheap, and that they're really giving a lot of falsehood to residents of the city of Port Colborne. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny, for bringing that up. That's great. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add to that. I had one of them visit me. These guys are pressure salesmen to the top, to the max, okay? And I think that they're preying on people, especially older or younger ones. The combination, the ones in the middle sort of can take care of themselves. It's the older ones and the younger ones that they seem to be preying on. And Darlene said it clearly in her letter. If you feel uncomfortable, don't buy, call the police. Simple as that. Okay, this pressure salesman tactic is, and it's interesting because what they do is they call their boss and they say, oh, this is happening, can I? And then they give you a little different deal because you're not buying into it. It's constant, and I finally threw mine out. I told her, get out of here. She was really upset with me. So be very careful, and I agree with Councillor Kenny. We as a city are not promoting this in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Councillor Danch.
Thanks for my 60-second talk here.
I'm 60 minutes. We have lots of time tonight. It's only 7:47.
I'm not used to this. I think it's directed towards Ron. This past weekend was Hazardous Waste Day in Port Colborne. It was set up at the Vale Center, and I just wanted to say it was fantastic. I had a few items around my own home, and just paints and whatever, things that you don't want to throw into the environment. And I was at the arena playing hockey until I got told to leave. And when I got there in the morning, they had the whole thing set up. They had it pyloned off, trailers, whatnot. You pulled in. I wasn't there 5 minutes, and my truck was emptied, and I was out the door. So I don't know if it's obviously something the region or Ron arranged there. Super job. Anybody out there that's got stuff that's like, oh, geez, what am I going to get rid of this stuff? That's the way to do it. You pay attention. I think it only comes to Port Colborne once a year, but that's the way to do it, and that's good for the environment and good for the people involved, and it was an excellent setup, and I just wanted to give a little shout out for you there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and I'll make sure I pass it on to the region tomorrow at Public Works. Ron, any comments?
Mr. Mayor, I used the HHW myself on Saturday, and as Councillor Danch said, it was an excellent setup. The only thing we do on our part, we offer the use of our valet parking lot for the region. They put this on once a year at all the various municipalities within the region. We're very happy to assist in that, and it's the turnout was tremendous. I know I was only there about 10 minutes, but there was a lineup of at least 20 cars when I was there, and I understand it was busy all the day. So great service.
Great, thank you. And of course, as I said earlier, if council had an appetite to actually elevate that service, you can for a second or even third drop off. But again, it adds to the cost of the overall levy. So, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Just got one item. I think we had talked about it before. I had a call from a resident who has had calls about foxes in town. His concern was that he's been on the Conservation Club and has noticed now that there seems to be a family of them. He seemed to think that there was about 4 altogether in the family. One thing that he did point out to me is if you go down Sugarloaf and you stop at the cenotaph and you look at the side of the hill, there's a hole that's been dug in the side of the hill. He thinks that is the Fox Den and was concerned about that, didn't know whether or not we could do anything about it. If we have to contact M&R to see if they have any idea what to do, but his response was that they're not supposed to be domiciled in an urban environment, and we really should look at doing something. So I don't know whether or not we're reactive to that, or the hole is obviously a safety concern. That's what I was more concerned about.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Elliott, we're aware of the Fox Den. We've called the appropriate authorities. We're going to take care of the situation. We're aware of it.
There's also 2 dens right on the side of Sugarloaf Hill, right at the end of Cement Plant Road and Lakeshore West. There's 2 dens up there as well. I'm not sure how high they are, but I'm constantly seeing them, babies and adult fox, running up and down and around the side. So being an avid outdoorsman myself, I can only assume that there's a few dens up there, and I've been told by one of the residents in the area that there are in fact 2 dens in there. So you might want to take a look up there as well. And the coyotes. But we'll leave that discussion for another day. I actually seen 3 of them walking down Cement Plant the other day, right in the middle of the day. It wasn't the first time either. Yeah, they're commonplace. So for those folks that are walking down Cement Plant Road, have eyes in the back of your head, because they are out there, especially when it starts getting dark out. Members of council, any further new business or councilors' items? Members of staff, are there any updates? You're good? Okay, let's move on to the reports. Item 1, Councilor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is my notice of motion, notice to property owners regarding property standards violation. That the Council of the City of Port Colborne directs staff to modify the current method of notification when inspection by the property standards officer reveals that a property does not conform with the standards prescribed by the bylaw, resulting in the issuance of a notice of violation. This notice of violations shall be sent, now I have here by prepaid registered mail, but in speaking with Dan earlier today, I'd like to actually change that a notice of violation be sent, and that can take whatever form staff deems necessary. But a notice of violation be sent to the assessed property owner and served in person to the occupant and/or posted on the building.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councilor Kenny. Are there any questions or comments to that? Councilor Desmarais.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. This is not meant to slow up the process at all. I would think that the timeline should stay as they are. This notice to the owner of the property is just simply for information purposes only, and it would allow for a landlord who happens to have a tenant that is maybe hiding what they're really doing. The landlord's not aware of what's going on. This way it allows the landlord to be aware of what's happening with their property, to allow that there could to know there could be issues with the city, and that the tenant is causing problems for the neighbors. It's an important step for a landlord to have these kinds of documents available, especially if we sent a letter, so that they can use them in further eviction processes, that sort of thing. It's not meant to change the timelines. We shouldn't be relying on the landlord to come in and take care of the problem. It should be, status quo as far as how we would normally, deal with posting that property and expect it to be the work to be done.
Thank you, Councilor. Further comments? Questions? Councilor Elliott and Councilor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, to staff who's ever going to look after it. Will we be sending a mailed notice to the assessed owner on every property that we do? Because I'm not sure, how do you determine which properties are tenanted and which properties are owned? Just because it's a single-family home doesn't mean that it doesn't have a tenant in it.
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor, first I had a discussion with Councilor Desmarais today, and this all pertains to the long grass bylaw, the maintenance of grass. Any other violation of property under the property standards, we do send a letter. If there's no compliance, we are required, when we are going to write an order, we then send that by registered mail, registered letter. This would only be for the maintenance of grass. Council knows from my last report, the last meeting, we green tag, we serve notice to the property on the building. What Councilor Desmarais is asking for, in addition to green tagging the building, she would like to have an express post letter sent to the owner of the property. That's going to require further review by staff to find out who the actual owner is, and the actual preparation of a letter and the mailing of that letter. There's also a cost to that. As I said to Councilor Demaray, we should budget for 2015 if we now are going to be sending letters to property owners that violate the long grass bylaw. You're looking at an additional $1,000 based on the number of complaints we receive and the times that we require compliance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Aquino. Councillor?
So it's every property with a long grass problem, then you're gonna send a letter to green tag and send a letter. So all of them are covered.
Okay.
Well, you have to. I mean, you can't,
Yeah.
how else do you determine who's living in the house?
Councillor Demaray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's why I changed the motion. Notification, just a simple letter. It doesn't have to be express post, just a simple letter, just to let the owner know. You're already tagging the property, so the occupant's already aware. That's all. And it's a matter of just looking it up. You can see when there's an owner listed outside of the list. I mean, you look at your voters list and you can see that. So I'm sure it's a very simple thing to see.
Okay. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I get the concept of this, but I don't think I can support it. I just went back to where we had our original discussion on that night. And there was, I think, it said in 2013, there was 98 long grass complaints. In 2014, there's already been 121 complaints for long grass. And yet, we only had representation from one person here that had a problem with it. And, you know, so I don't know whether we're trying to fix something that really isn't broken, where it's worked for 120 people and didn't work for one. You know, I with the costs and everything, and I know we had a long discussion on this when we put this policy in the first time, and you know, we really vetted it very well, and I think the policy has done well over the years. And now we have, you know, basically one person that's come to us and has a problem with it. There could have been a few others, but we didn't hear about it. But I don't think we need to fix something that basically is working reasonably well. And I think staff has kind of alluded that that is the case. So I'll just throw that out there for conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Bodnar. Further questions, comments, members? Councillor Demaray, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not looking at fixing the process. The process works very well. I'm looking at one additional step, just as a matter of providing information to landlords in particular. And we do have an issue with a lot of absentee landlords and things that are going on with their property that many times they're not even aware of. It helps the system along a little bit. Gives them that information if they choose to take that to eviction processes. That's theirs to do. If not, we've done the right thing and let them know. That's all it's all about. It's about just making the city a better place to live.
Thank you, Councillor. Further comments, questions? Just one question I have before I go back to you, Councillor Elliott. The process right now, you tag it, green warning, you tag it right off the bat. It gets cut if they don't get it done within a certain amount of days. Okay, so my question, first of all, is how many times do we actually have to go and cut it? Out of those 120 some odd that you had, how many times do we actually have to go and cut? Refresh me on that.
Through Mr. Mayor, and that's a good question. I did have that in my last report. I believe it was 23 or 30, 23 times.
So 23 times. So, and what I'm getting at here is I'm trying to mitigate the cost. So if you have 100 and some odd, 120 some odd warnings go out, you have 23 that you end up having to cut. Is there an opportunity just to concentrate on those 23 is what I'm getting at. So instead of having to send a letter out to 120 some odd people, you wait until it gets to the point in the process where they haven't been cut, and just before you're, so let's say a week before you're going to go in and cut, that's when you actually send a letter out to the owner of the property. And so what I'm getting at here is you're mitigating the cost. You don't have to send a letter out to all 120 some odd. And at the end of the day, you're sort of just giving that last warning to the owner of the property, because you're gonna send the bill out anyways. So if you wanna actually hit two birds with one stone, then send the warning and the bill at the same time. So basically, this is what you're gonna be charged if it's not cut in 5 days. So they're getting both the warning and the bill, which you're otherwise gonna have to send out anyways. So I'm just trying to think out loud here to get, and I respect what Angie's trying to do here, because we had the resident, 1 or 10 or 15 or 20 of them, still it's a concern, it should be dealt with. While at the same time trying to mitigate the costs, as well as, quite frankly, letting the owner of the property know exactly what they're gonna be charged for. What's, quite frankly, a blindside, because they haven't received any kind of warning, only the tenant has, and the tenants, you know, tenants can sometimes be like, just ignoring it and just throwing it in the garbage, and all of a sudden the owner gets on the hook for the actual cost. So what I'm getting at, Dan, is, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to give comment on, is would it be more advantageous financially, as well as with respect to the protocol that we already have in place, if in fact we just simply concentrate on those last ones that we would otherwise go and cut anyways, to send them the actual heads up, owner, we're looking at cutting your property, and by the way, you're gonna be charged so many dollars to have it cut.
Mr. Mayor, my question back to you would then be, those individuals that we have to write a letter to, they have 5 days to cut. The fact that we're writing a letter to them, how much time do they need extra to get the grass cut?
Okay.
That's the question.
And I'm just tossing this out here for discussion. So I'm just trying to get some, I'm trying to facilitate both concerns here, because I understand both, and I respect them both, but, you know, how can we drive up the middle here and try to get a solution to it? So I'm gonna go to Ron first, 'cause I just went to you, Ange, and then I'm gonna come back to Ange. Councillor Elliott, did you have your hand up? I see you sort of chomping at the bit there. I'll give you a second to think about whether you want to jump in or not. Councillor Bodnar.
Okay. While we're throwing out stuff for discussion, I'll throw out this, that Councillor Demeray talked about fairness, and, you know, I think that's a good expression, but how about fairness to the neighbors? Usually the grass cutting takes, you know, people don't go out and measure people's, I don't think they do. You know, like, you're a half an inch over and I'm calling right away. It usually festers for a while, you know. I mean, we talked about grass that was 3 feet high. You know, like, the neighbors have been really patient, I think, or they'd be down here at City Hall complaining. So the fairness thing, I think, goes both ways. So, you know, obviously people know they have to cut their grass, and I just think in the fairness thing, the neighbors have probably stewed over this for a lot of weeks, and finally they couldn't take it anymore, and they've called, and now we're going to give people another, you know, whatever, by the time we mail, it could be 3 weeks at least before they have to cut by the time we let them get their letter. So I still have a problem with the process of that extra letter.
Thank you, Councillor Bodnar. Great points. I have Councillor Demeray, and then I think Councillor Elliott. Councillor Kenny as well. Councillor Demeray, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. No, the point is not to delay the process. The process would stay the same process. You wouldn't change the timelines. The letter is for information purposes only. It doesn't have to be express post. It has to be just a little note dropped in the mail. Nothing more than that. Just send it to the property owner so that the property owner is aware. That's all. There should be no extreme costs. It doesn't cost $11 to put one little note in the mail. That's a stamp and a quick little, you can do a form letter and just pop it off, give a signature, and in it goes. Just that simple. It's not an elaborate affair here, and it's certainly not going to change any timelines. That letter to the owner doesn't allow them any extra time. That's just here, this information so you know what's happening to your property with your tenant. That's all it is. No more than that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Demeray. When you green tag, the green tag on the door, the same day you put that green tag on the door, you send out a letter. Costs a postage stamp and an envelope. You already have the form letter ready. Say your house has just been tagged for lack of cutting the grass, you have 5 days. If not, we will cut it and it will be charged back.
Thank you, Councillor.
For as long as it took Councillor Danch and I to get property cleaned up on one of our streets in our ward, because he was gone all the time. I mean, you know, I I know the fact he was a long-haul driver, but you know, once in a while, that long-haul driver came home. And I'm telling you, we've had lots of comments back since from the neighborhood saying, thank you for finally getting that done. But when it takes 2 years, 2 years, sir, that's what it took, and I finally got done.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks.
Further questions, comments? Yeah.
You know, I was going to say, if we're not changing the timelines, this is the issue that I have. Green tag, you got 5 days to cut after the green tag, okay? So I pop the letter in the mail. Same day. That letter doesn't get to the homeowner for 6 days, and that letter says you have 5 days to cut your grass. From the date of it, okay? From the date of the letter, or from the date of receipt that he gets it. From the date of the letter. Now all of a sudden the homeowner opens up the letter and it says you have 5 days to cut from this day, and they go, hey, that's not enough notice. I didn't get it till the 6th day. You didn't even give me enough notice to cut the grass, and you went and cut it. For one complaint, I'm just saying, I won't support it because we're trying to reinvent the wheel because of one complaint. We had over 100 green tags, 23 cuts. So almost 100 people abided by the notice that was posted on their door. You know what? Let it flow through next year. We'll see what happens. If there's more than one complaint that happens again, maybe we have an issue, but because of one person that comes and over 100 people comply with the way that it works now, I'm not going to change it. I'll agree with Councillor Bodner that it seems to be working okay, and we're trying. I just think that we're going to get in more trouble by mailing out letters and people get them post-cut, and then them turn around and say, I didn't know. Now you didn't even give me enough time. Cut it, green tag it, and move on. Same way.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Desmarais, I'll be lenient. Go ahead.
Thank you. Last point, it's just somehow or other, I must not be getting my point across. The letter is simply notification that this action has taken place. It's not giving the landlord an opportunity to change the process or to even act on the process. That's already been done with the tenant, the same way we would normally be doing it. The letter is just giving the landlord the information that it has happened. Nothing more than that. My thinking behind this is less worrying about responding to complaints and more being concerned with the problems we have with some landlords not taking care of their properties or having tenants in them that really don't care. This allows landlords to take a different tone. If they want to evict, they've got something now that helps back them up. If not, that's fine, but it's just an action. It's about, like I say, it's about making Port Colborne a better place. Nothing more than that.
And thank you. No further comments or questions. I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so it's lost. Lost.
So it's 4 and 4?
No, it was 4 and 3. Barb abstained. Barb was abstained. Okay, so 4-3, so it's lost. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 9. Councillor Danch.
Department of Planning and Development Report number 2014-68, subject Rural Economic Development Program Funding Agreement. That the mayor and the clerk be authorized to enter into an agreement to accept the $30,500 grant from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs.
Thank you, Councillor Danch. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Steele. Evan, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a few months since I was last here. So this was a application that the city's been working on in partnership with the region, and I need to stress also in partnership with the local business community. There are a few private sector businesses that are very keen on this project, and as well as business organizations, to run a rail line, basically reinstating a rail line that existed prior to 1997, 1998, running a rail line from the Valet lead that runs between Durham and Fraser Streets down into the area that's currently leased by Snyder Dock Service, leased from the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation. So this grant is going to fund a study to determine the feasibility of it, both from a economic standpoint, is there a business case to be made for this line, and from an engineering standpoint, is this something that is doable still at this point?
Great, thank you, Evan. Just to add a bit to that, guys, and I think for the most part, this sort of stems from last term of council, whereby I had called upon a lot of the businesses that would be attached to a project like this. We've got the gateway strategy in place. The gateway strategy has been established because of the strengths that we have. Those strengths primarily are surrounded by a multimodal transportation hub, distribution logistics, as well as the energy cluster that we actually established last term as well. When you bring that all together, and you bring all the companies together, Rankin, Snyder, Quebec Stevedoring, and a few others that I can't mention right now because it's still confidential, everyone agrees that a rail link, we call it rail on apron, on the docks adds to the overall multimodal mechanism and therefore advantage that we have here in Port Colborne and within the region of Niagara. So when you talk about the incentives that we talked about earlier, gateway, CIPs, foreign trade zone, those are all fine and dandy, but we also have to have the capital in place so that therefore when these companies do come in, they have those abilities other than just to widen a road and rail up to a certain point. And what we want to do is bring rail right down to the canal as it was at one time. That's what this application is for, is to put a business case together. So, and we're being funded by the province, which is great news. Once again, successfully getting some more money down here from Queen's Park. Okay, but second to that, and if and when, I'm hoping the word's when, this is proven to be an advantage for not only Port Colborne, but for the Niagara region, especially under the economic strategy that we established, then of course, it'll give us an ability to hopefully have more credibility to go back to the province and the feds to then apply for the capital work, which is actually putting the line back in. And that's the reason for this report. That's the reason why we're taking this direction. And hopefully the next council will then be able to successfully receive word from the province and feds based on this study that that'll happen. And rest assured, I'll be driving that from my end as well, hopefully. Okay. So with that said, members, Evan, anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we both covered it. So.
Okay. Dan, anything you wanted to add?
No, sir.
Ron, anything you wanted to add? You're good? Evan, go ahead.
Actually, sorry, I should point out that so we're getting 50% funding from the Ontario Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs. The regional municipality of Niagara is also contributing $10,000 towards this study in recognition of the fact of its regional importance. It's not just a Port Colborne issue, it's something that will benefit the regional economy.
And not only are we from the regional end doing that and that contribution, but also council, and for those councils that are returning, keep in mind we also have about $360,000 sitting in a reserve at the region for this capital work. So if and when this goes through and moves forward and it's positive and we make application, or the city makes application for the rail, for the capital work to happen, you already have $350,000 sitting in a regional account to leverage the funding that you, the province, and the feds would otherwise put into this project. So keep that in mind for the next term of council as well. You're already that much ahead of the game. And I know Peter likes that. You're writing it down? So with that, members, no further comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Okay, so that's it for the items, members. We'll now move on to the adoption of the minutes. The adoption of the minutes of the 21st meeting regular of Committee of the Whole, September 8th, 2014, moved by Councillor Steele, seconded by Councillor Kenny. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion tonight? Really? Usually during election time, there's about 3 or 4 of them. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Danch, Councillor Bodner, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Frank, it wouldn't be the same. It just wouldn't be the same. Members, we're now going to move on to our council portion of tonight's agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, if I can have a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a pecuniary interest in camera item B, as the brokerage that I represent represents the city in this transaction.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any further disclosures? With none, move on to the adoption of the minutes. If you don't mind, I'll do them in block. The minutes of the 26th meeting regular of council dated September 8th, 2014. The minutes of the 27th meeting special of council dated September 15th, 2014. And the minutes of the 28th meeting special of council dated September 15th, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Items requiring a separate discussion? If I can have a motion to accept all the items listed on the agenda, please. Councillor Demeray, Councillor Steele, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. I do have a few proclamations here, folks, and I'll be looking for a mover and seconder, please. The first being Fire Prevention Week. That whereas many dedicated citizens have joined with volunteer, professional, and industrial fire safety personnel as partners in fire prevention in a relentless effort to minimize loss of life, destruction of property, and damage to the environment. And whereas fire losses in Canada remain unacceptably high in comparison with those in other industrialized nations, thereby necessitating improved fire prevention measures. And whereas it is desirable that information on fire causes and recommended preventative measures be disseminated during a specific time of the year. And whereas 2014 fire prevention theme for this period is Working Smoke Alarms Save Lives, test yours every month. Always make sure that you test smoke alarms monthly, change the batteries once a year, replace smoke alarms after 10 years, develop and practice a home fire escape plan with everyone in your household. Okay, guys, test time. What's the 3 words? You got it. Frank, come on, you should know that. Stop, drop, and roll. You know, every time I ask, when the youngsters come in here, every time I ask that question, they're on it like that. They got it. So. So let's keep that in mind. And of course, with the little ones, guys, you know, stop, drop, and roll. Let's make sure that our families, especially little ones, get it, and they're fully aware of what to do. Your safety is your responsibility. Only working smoke alarms save lives. In fact, smoke alarms can increase your chances of surviving a fire by up to 50%. Now, therefore, I, Vance M. Mayor Badaway, City of Port Colborne Mayor, do hereby proclaim the week of October 5th to October 11th, 2014, as Fire Prevention Week here in the City of Port Colborne. Now, just a small note here that the Port Colborne Fire Department as well will be holding an open house to kick off Fire Prevention Week on Saturday, October 4th, over at the Fire Hall, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Be sure to bring your friends, your family, for some fun-filled events. Hosted by the Chief and the team over at the Fire Hall. All is welcome. So with that, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny and Councillor Doucette. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. The next proclamation is Waste Reduction Week. That whereas the generation of solid waste and the needless waste of water and energy resources are recognized as global environmental problems. And whereas municipal and provincial governments have an important role to play in promoting waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, and other conservation measures. And whereas communities, businesses, and organizations from across Canada have committed to working together to raise awareness of these issues during Waste Reduction Week in Canada. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Vance M. Badaway, proclaim the week of October 20th to October 26th, 2014 as Waste Reduction Week here in the city of Port Colborne. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. And lastly is Child Care Worker and Early Childhood Education Educator Day here in the city of Port Colborne. That whereas years of research confirms the benefits of high-quality child care for young children's intellectual, emotional, social, and physical development and later life outcomes. And whereas child care promotes the well-being of children and responds to the needs of parents, child care workers, and the broader community by supporting quality of life so that the citizens can fully participate in and contribute to the economic and social life of their community. And whereas many studies show trained and knowledgeable early childhood educators and child care staff are the most important element in the quality of child care. Now therefore, I, Mayor Van-Sam Badaway, proclaim October 29th, 2014 as the 14th Annual Child Care Worker and Early Childhood Educator Appreciation Day here in the city of Port Colborne in recognition of the education, the dedication, and the commitment of child care workers to children, their families, and the quality of life of the overall community. If I can have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. 3 sets of minutes, members. I'll do them in block if you don't mind. The first set of minutes is the discussion notes of the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting dated August 13th, 2014. The minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of August 12th, 2014. And finally, the minutes of the Heritage Port Colborne meeting dated June 11th, 2014. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodner. Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? No notices of motion. Madam Clerk, the introduction of the bylaws, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 6135-10114, being a bylaw to temporarily close section of Market Square for the purposes of the downtown Port Colborne Business Improvement Area 4th Annual Harvest Festival. Bylaw 6136-10214, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a lease agreement with Dogs, Burgers, and Fries, Inc. for the operation of the Icebox Food Service Area. Bylaw 6137-10314, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Niagara Compliance Audit Committee. Bylaw 6138-10414, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Flavors Advisory Committee. And finally, bylaw 6139-10514, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a funding agreement in respect of financial contribution by the Ontario Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs as specified in Department of Planning and Development Report 2014-68.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Steele, questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Confirmatory bylaw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 6140-10614, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of September 22nd, 2014.
Thank you, Ashley. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, Councillor Elliott, all in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Now, before I move on to a motion to go into closed session, I do want to mention to those in the public that we have, this is tough, 3 more meetings left in this term of council. We have a meeting on Tuesday, October 14th, which is a Committee of the Whole and Council meeting, beginning at 6:30 p.m. here in the chamber. That's followed by Monday, November 10th, Committee of the Whole Council meeting beginning here in the chamber at 6:30 p.m. And that's followed by Monday, November 24th. Once again, Committee of the Whole and Council here in the chamber beginning at 6:30 p.m. And the inaugural meeting for the new council is slated for Monday, December 1st, 2014, and that begins at 7 p.m. So, Bill, before they kick us out of here, we got 3 more kicks at the can.
That's right.
And we're good to go.
Notices the motion coming forward like crazy now.
Yeah.
Send Bill home.
So with that, members, Bill and I, you know, if it doesn't go at least the way that I want it to go, You're not running for anything. Him and I will be sitting way in the back there eating popcorn, you know, heckling all you guys.
We're bringing popcorn in.
So with that, members, I do have a motion, or I will have a motion, I hope, to go into closed session to deal with the minutes of the closed session portion of the September 8, 2014 regular council meeting, and B, a verbal report from the Director of Planning and Development regarding correspondence received concerning the potential disposition, I'm having a hard time tonight, disposition of city-owned land pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239C, 2C, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or the local board. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Danch, seconder. Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Have a wonderful week.